Charity is everywhere. It's in churches, it's in parks, it's in universities, and every part of society needs charity to survive.
Charity to me is about supporting our most vulnerable.
We have over 168,000 charities across the country doing really different things.
The Charity Commission regulates charities in England and Wales.
The Commission ensures that charities are doing what they say they'll do.
We provide advice and guidance, and we also intervene when things go wrong.
Protecting public trust and confidence in the sector. Without it, charities would not be able to thrive and would not be able to support the beneficiaries that desperately need their assistance.
Not only protecting charities, but it's protecting the public, and it's protecting what we love, which is charitable endeavour.
Good afternoon. I am Ian Corrett and I'm Chair of the Charity Commission. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Commission's annual public meeting, and for a second year it's being hosted as a virtual event. I hope you enjoyed that short opening video where some of our staff gave their perspective on the importance of charities and the work that the Commission does. Please note that we have nearly 3,500 people registered, and we are grateful that so many of you are taking part today. We've designed a tight agenda and we hope it's an engaging one. In a moment, our CEO, Helen Stevenson, will talk us through the work of the Commission over the past year and our priorities for the year ahead. Helen, some of the Commission's senior team and I will then take your questions. Please do submit questions, whether about the Commission's work or our perspective on issues relevant to charities. And to submit a question, use the Slido box on the event microsite. We can't promise to answer all the questions, but we will respond to as many as we can. We also encourage you to take part in the discussion on Twitter using the hashtag #CCAPM. In opening this meeting, I'd like to reflect very briefly on my time as Chair of the Commission. I joined the board in 2019 as a legal board member, and I was appointed interim chair in February this year. Amongst the most enjoyable aspects of the role is the opportunity it presents to speak directly with those involved in charities. Over the past 7 months, I have experienced firsthand the enormous diversity of the sector we regulate, and I have seen the passion and commitment of those involved in charities. I've also learned a lot about the role of charities and how they have played in responding to the pandemic, and of course, the challenges the restrictions have presented for the sector. For example, I held a virtual roundtable discussion with representatives of 3 emergency rescue charities to discuss how COVID-19 has impacted the way in which those charities deliver their vital services. Speaking with their chairs, I learned how they are tackling fundraising challenges caused by the pandemic. And I learned how the trend for staycations has increased the pressure on these charities as holidaymakers benefit from the great scenery of England and Wales. In June, I met with Groundwork North Wales, a charity supporting individuals facing challenges and isolation in modern society. I heard from the trustees and staff about its work providing experience and training to transform lives in disadvantaged areas of North Wales. They presented a compelling sense of the lifeline the charity provides to individuals and, by extension, to communities, and of the resilience of those communities. It is clear that such charities are a significant force for good across the country. While the Charity Commission's role is not to champion or promote the work of particular charities, as Chair, I am very aware that our ultimate purpose is to ensure that charity should thrive, to protect and promote the role of charity in society. I'm also aware just how reliant that work is on the commitment and the hard work of volunteer trustees. Helen will shortly talk a little about the work of the Commission and what it is doing to support and enable you to get that right. I would like to thank our 700,000 trustees. What you do is important and appreciated. Finally, I would like to highlight that this event is uploaded onto YouTube later, and with that, I would like to introduce the Chief Executive, Helen Stevenson.
Good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us. As Ian has said, we're delighted that so many of you have made time to take part in our annual public meeting. In some ways, I regret that the uncertain circumstances mean that I'm speaking to you through a screen again this year, I do miss real life events because it was often in the margins, in the tea breaks and the cloakrooms of our public meetings that the real magic seemed to happen for me. A serendipitous conversation with a trustee over a cup of tea that helped me see the Commission's work from a fresh perspective. A visit to a local charity that grew my understanding of the diverse ways in which charities deliver on their purposes. Such experiences cannot yet be easily replicated online. So I hope that a Commission public meeting will be coming to a town or a city near you again soon. In the meantime, knowing that this virtual event makes us as accessible to a larger group of people and a greater range of charities than was possible in the past serves as a welcome silver lining. It's fitting that the great scale and diversity of the charity sector in England and Wales is reflected in our audience this afternoon. Something that it's worth taking a moment just to reflect on. There are 170,000 charities on our register, and they're run by 700,000 trustees, volunteering their time almost always entirely for free. They employ over 1 million people in this country and around the world, and they have a combined income of over £84 billion. Attempts have been made to quantify the value that charities bring, and this really matters. But I'm not sure it would ever be possible to reduce the role that charities play in our society to a purely economic measure, to a fact or a figure. Charities support us throughout our lives, cradle to grave. They curate much of what makes life worth living in the meantime. And they are a source of immense civic pride. They bring us together. Events since last March have only served to highlight how tightly charity is woven into the fabric of our communities and our national life. In the face of national crisis, many charities stepped up to the plate, and visibly so, assisting our emergency services, tackling poverty, supporting those left lonely and vulnerable. Conversely, the work of some charities became conspicuous by its sudden absence, by the many and varied acts of charity that were no longer possible when the restrictions were imposed. In other words, charities have shown the difference they make, both in what they have contributed during the pandemic and the gap that was left behind when their work was interrupted. That visibility may be having a positive effect on public trust in charities. Research carried out earlier this year showed that levels of public trust have risen in a small but significant way. After an all-time low 3 years ago, there's evidence that people's trust in charities may be recovering, and this is welcome. But there's no room for complacencies, for charities, or for the Commission. The upheaval of the past 18 months may have changed how many charities operate, how they fundraise, and how they communicate. And we'll say more about that later. But the pandemic has not altered the fundamental relationship between charities, the public, and the state. Every single charity on the Commission's register runs on the fuel of public support and trust in one way or another, whether in the form of voluntary donations, through people's willingness to volunteer their time for charity, or in the tacit support of taxpayers and citizens for the fiscal benefits and status associated with being a charity. And it's important to remember that people's basic expectations of charity remains unchanged. Their sense of what makes charities special and worthy of the status they hold in our society is unaffected by the pandemic. These expectations are shared among people from a wide range of backgrounds, and they're simple to understand, if not always easy to live up to. People expect charities to show that they make a positive difference. They expect them to spend a high proportion of funds on the end cause, and they expect charities to live their values, showing charity not just in what they do, but how they behave along the way. The Commission plays a crucial role in protecting and promoting the relationship between the public, charities, and the state. We are guardians of a covenant of trust that plays such a central role in our communities and in our society. And we do so by ensuring that trustees meet what the law requires of them and understand what the public expects of them. How we do so, our immediate focus and priorities is rightly responsive to the needs of the time. Since the start of the pandemic, we have prioritised the support that we offer trustees, helping them during a time of unprecedented challenge. Since March 2020, we have regularly updated easy-to-find online guidance on responding to common situations arising in charities because of the pandemic. This included guidance on the use of reserves to manage financial difficulties and on holding AGMs during periods of restriction. We created a new facility for charities to apply for extensions to their annual reporting requirements, and we granted nearly 5,000 exemptions in total. We also launched a new set of 5-minute guides which cover the core syllabus that all trustees should be across. The guides were not created in response to the pandemic, but recent disruptions made it all the more important that trustees have access to basic information on how to run a charity well. The guides are about helping trustees to be certain in uncertain times. We want our online guidance to serve as a trustee's first stop for questions about running their charity. But there will always be times when a trustee needs more bespoke help, when they need to speak to a human being. So I'm proud of the uninterrupted service our contact centre has provided over the past 18 months. The team has answered charities' calls every single working day throughout the pandemic. During the last financial year, they fielded around 60,000 calls, supporting over 30,000 individual charities. We've also continued our work as Registrar of Charities in England and Wales, ensuring only those organisations the law recognises as charities are entered onto the register. In total, we assessed over 8,300 applications this year, around 60% of which resulted in new charity registrations. In doing so, we have prioritised applications from organisations responded directly to the pandemic. And we have launched an improved public register of charities which makes more information about individual charities available to donors and the public. Looking ahead, we have ambitious plans to engage more directly and effectively with individual trustees, helping them run their charity well and deliver on its aims. We're developing a new online portal which ultimately will be tailored to trustees' specific needs. And I'm really excited about this project as it has the potential to significantly improve trustees' experience of running their charity and their relationship with the regulator. And that in turn to help create better run, more effective charities that are better able to meet their potential. But as much as we want to engage and communicate more with trustees, we want that to be purposeful and necessary. As you may be aware, the Commission is supporting a new charities bill which aims to do away with unnecessary red tape. The provisions would simplify and modernise the way in which trustees can undertake a range of activities, including changing their charity's governing document, using permanent endowments, disposing of their charity's land. If enacted, the bill would make a tangible difference to charities, and it would help ensure we at the Commission can focus our work where it has the greatest impact in the public interest. I'm pleased that the proposals have met with support from across the charity sector as a positive step to simplify the law, and I hope that they pass parliamentary scrutiny. But as well as supporting charities to get it right, we must continue to regulate robustly where things go wrong. We know it matters to the public that there is a regulator fighting their corner, holding to account those who breach the rules and betray the trust placed in charities by donors and taxpayers. Last year, we opened 59 new statutory inquiries into charities and used our regulatory powers on over 2,000 occasions to promote compliance with the law. This included issuing 25 official warnings and using our power to disqualify a trustee on 16 occasions. We also handled a growing number of whistleblowing reports from people involved in charities. Last year, we received 431 reports, a nearly 75% increase on the previous period. We welcome the rise because whistleblowers are a crucial and valuable source of information and intelligence about wrongdoing in charities. It's important people with concerns about a charity they volunteer for or work in know that they can come to us, and we have invested in improving the service we give to whistleblowers, including by introducing a dedicated phone line. But the increase in reports may also indicate growing pressures on board dynamics and good governance in charities, linked perhaps to the challenges arising during the pandemic. As you may be aware, some of our recent compliance work has involved controversial, sensitive issues that might broadly be described as relating to culture wars. Some have criticised us for opening cases into these matters. They have questioned the motives of those who raised concerns. Let me use this opportunity to be absolutely clear. The Commission does not and must not examine people's worldviews or ideologies before deciding whether they have a right to have their concerns examined by us. We will always take concerns raised with us seriously, and we will assess every concern fairly and consistently. Where we find no problems, we will say so. And where we are concerned about trustees' oversight of their charities, we will take action to help bring them back on course. Public debate in our society feels increasingly divided. It sometimes seems we can't even agree to disagree. So it's vital that regulators like the Commission steer a clear-headed, steady course through sensitive issues, guided by a legal framework set down by Parliament, regulating on behalf of the public. The Commission will always strive to do that. But it's also important that charities themselves are alive to the wide range of legitimate views and sensibilities that exist within the public on whose support they ultimately rely. This doesn't mean avoiding controversy or difficult issues. But trustees must ensure their decision and priorities are driven by their charity's aims, not by their own worldview and outlook. So assessing concerns and addressing wrongdoing will remain a crucial part of what we do as a regulator. But we can't just investigate when things have already gone wrong. We must also help charities anticipate risks that they face. That requires us to make better use of the data we hold. Over the year ahead, we will begin a fundamental review of the data we collect from charities, including through the annual return and charities' annual report and accounts. We will also review and improve how we make that data work once we hold it. This will help us become a more proactive regulator, able to step in before risks become entrenched problems. And of course, one of the greatest risks to emerge for charities this decade, as for the country as a whole, has been the COVID pandemic. As I described earlier, we've done our bit to help charities get through. To do this best, we need understanding about what is happening in real time, to keep our finger on the pulse. We speak often to sector bodies and also regularly meet individual charities, as Ian described earlier. And this year, to delve even deeper, we commissioned further research into ways in which COVID has impacted charities. We'll publish these latest findings shortly, but I wanted to use this opportunity to share some of the early insights that research offers. And it's a complex picture. Such is the diversity of the sector in terms of charity size, activities, and operations, that there is no simple way of summing up what COVID has meant for charities. But what we can see is that COVID has had a significant impact on most charities. 72% of those asked told us that they had to change, curtail, or halt their work entirely. Smaller charities in particular saw their services severely impacted. 1 in 4 paused their activities completely during the first lockdown. The impact of this on those who benefit from their work is harder to measure, but it was likely that it was in some cases significant. But our research also points to charities' resilience. Charities rose to the challenge COVID presented. Many were quick to adapt and take evasive action during the first lockdown and the sudden loss of income that followed, pivoting their work to respond directly to the pandemic, changing the way they deliver services, including by moving them online, refocusing on core projects, sometimes taking very difficult decisions to cut staffing or spend on things like research. Others dipped into their reserves to keep them afloat. And throughout the past 18 months, many charities have assessed government support, including through the furlough scheme. Over half of the largest charities, so those with incomes of over £500,000, say they made use of the furlough or other emergency funding schemes. In other words, some charities took strong early action in response to unprecedented challenges. This response may be part of the reason that we have so far seen fewer charities fail and dissolve than we might have predicted back in March of last year. Last year, 97 charities reported that they were insolvent as part of their annual return to the Commission. This is up by a third on previous periods, but still a relatively small number in total. Indeed, some charities, especially larger ones, have found they have built up rather than drawn down their reserves. And there are some grounds for continued optimism. For example, only 10% of those we asked anticipate financial difficulties in the months ahead to present a critical threat to their survival. But the sector's resilience has been tested, and many charities will be less able to weather any further storms. And for some charities, the most difficult times may lie ahead. The challenges will not just be operational and not just financial, but also about people, about relationships, about maintaining good governance and a healthy board dynamic, even where there are differences of opinion about how to shape the charity's work into a future that remains uncertain. We've already seen an increase in disputes in charities, and we expect that to continue. And so I'd like to use this opportunity to say this. As you face difficult decisions about how to adapt your charity's work to changing times, be alive to the risk of disagreements escalating. Don't place being right ahead of doing the right thing. Prioritise communication with those you work with and work for, and with those on whose support you rely. I mentioned earlier that the public want to see charity not just in what you achieve for your beneficiaries, but also in the behaviour and attitudes you demonstrate when making decisions on behalf of your charity. I don't underestimate the immense challenges and dilemmas trustees face, especially during these times. But perhaps the clue lies in the word itself, trustee. The word implies that you are the custodian, not just of your charity's assets and activities, but of its mission, its reason for existing in the first place. My advice is to remain resolutely focused on your charity's purpose in whatever challenges you face. This may not protect you from making mistakes or insulate your charity against difficulties, but it will mean you have played your part in upholding that bond of trust on which all charities, wherever they work and whatever they do, ultimately depend. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Commission and the public that we serve, both for the work you have done over the course of this most difficult year and your continued resolve in the weeks and the months ahead. Thank you.
Registration is a really powerful marker for the public to ensure that charities are well run.
The registration team is the gateway to the Commission. It's new charities' first experience of becoming regulated by the Charity Commission.
It gives us the opportunity to make sure that charities do have the correct processes in place to govern their charity, to manage their finances, and to also safeguard the public or anyone that they may come into contact with.
The purpose of a charity is one of the most important things that we look at in an application. The Charities Act states that a charitable purpose is something which falls within the 13 descriptions of purposes.
Our team worked very hard to ensure that they're understood by those organisations applying for charitable status. We will only register organisations with a charitable purpose.
To me, the charity sector is something that is a lifeline for people. It can be a safety net, and it can also help bring communities and societies together as well. Coming to the Charity Commission allowed me to be able to play a part in protecting charities, making sure they can thrive and making sure they're accessible to people.
There was a range of charities that applied to the Charity Commission for charitable status during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Our registration team were able to adapt quickly to the difficulties of working from home, and we receive about 8,000 applications a year. This didn't decrease, and we were able to uphold our service levels.
The sector, as it always does, pulled together, and the public, despite being in times of hardship themselves, have continued to put their hands in their pockets and support these organisations and the good work that they're doing.
When a charity is registered with the Charity Commission, it then goes onto the public register.
The registration's core purpose is to protect the integrity of the Central Register of Charities.
The public can inspect those records at any time. They can see who the trustees are, they can see the governance of the charity, they can see the impact they make through their impact reports, and also, importantly, they can see where their money is going to. And this is really important to uphold public trust and confidence.
I'd like to thank the registration team for their careful and thoughtful work. Now it's time for the Q&A panel. If you still have a question to put to me or the team, please do use the Slido box, which is available on the event microsite. People have been sending in questions throughout the past few days, and we won't have time to answer them all, but we have made a wise selection. We'll try to get through as many as we can. First, I'm going to ask our panellists to introduce themselves. You've met Helen Stevenson, so I won't ask her. I'll ask John to go first.
Hello there, I'm John Mayton. I'm the Assistant Director of Legal Services.
I'm Paul Latham. I'm Director of Communications and Policy.
Hello there, I'm Nick Baker, the Chief Operating Officer.
And Helen Erner is unable to join us today due to COVID separation, so she will join us by a link.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Helen Erner. I'm the Director of Regulatory Services.
Thank you. So, the first question. Why is it so difficult to contact the Charity Commission? I would like to speak to somebody in the House, but I am never successful.
I think I'll take that one, Ian. So first off, I think my response is one of regret and sorry that you've sort of experienced that level of service. It is important that you have ease in your ability to contact us and speak to us. You know, it's important we hear what you've got to say. You know, you are busy trustees, you're busy people working in the charity sector, so we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to contact us. That said, I recognise, you know, on this occasion that we perhaps not delivered the service that you required, but by and large, I think we need to recognise the work of the contact centre. Helen mentioned it early in her presentation that, you know, we had to dismantle the contact team from one that worked in an office environment to one that worked from home, and they did that, and we did not lose one day's service, which I think is very credible on the staff that worked there. Also, the element in that time, they dealt with over 60,000 calls, and the service levels, again, were quite impressive, despite the challenges where 95% of those calls were answered, and then I think it was something like about 80% of those calls were answered in a minute and a half. So I think there was, you know, some quite impressive service provision there. That said, we're not complacent. That said, we can do things better. We are looking at further investment, either through online guidance, so that you get that guidance there at your convenience for you to look at, and hopefully don't feel the need to call us. But actually now, if you do call us, we've got a callback facility. So if queues are high or you're busy, just leave us your number and we'll get back to you. But it's important, you know, please contact us.
Thank you. What can the Commission and others do to raise the public profile of trusteeship? And that's in particular in order to encourage a broader set of people to become charity trustees.
So I'm happy to take that one, Ian. So it's a really important point, and in fact we're coming up to Trustee Week in October, and we're going to be using that to promote trusteeship in general, but also in particular the issue around diversity of trustees in all their forms. So I think, first of all, I'd like to just reiterate the point that Helen made earlier, and indeed Ian, about just how grateful and kind of proud we are of trustees and the work that they've done, particularly during this period of the pandemic. But it is true that if you look at trustees in terms of their makeup, we did some research on this a few years ago, they are predominantly older, predominantly white, and by about a 2-to-1 majority, predominantly men. And we would like to see a greater diversity in the trustee base over time. And that matters because if you have a diversity of trustees, you bring a diversity of experience, a diversity of thinking, and I think you get better decisions overall in the interests of the charity. So definitely something that's on our agenda, not only for Trustee Week in November, but actually going forward for the Commission.
I'd like just to add a couple of points to that, if I can. I think two things that I think are really important for the charity sector, and they're quite, I think, simple steps. The first is that if we were to ensure that all of the trustee positions were through an open recruitment process, it would give more people the chance to, to access those roles and become trustees. I think that would be a step that we could take, or that the sector could take, which would improve diversity, I think, quite quickly. And then secondly, it's just about creating that pipeline for trustees. And often if you've got people who haven't been experienced in governance or running organisations, involving them through committees in other parts of the governance structure can give them the skills and experience they need, which may enable them to go on to the trustee board. So I think those two quite simple things would be steps that we could see increased diversity in the trustee base for England and Wales, definitely.
Thank you. It is good to remove burden of uploading annual reports for smaller trustees, but could it not be permitted voluntarily as an important public information service? Helen Erno, can you take that one?
Of course, thank you. We encourage all charities to make their information available, their annual accounts and reports. So as was described in Helen's speech, it's and mentioned on the video, so that people who are raising funds on your behalf and the public can understand what a charity is doing, where funding is being channeled to. It's really important for charities to be transparent and accountable. But as the question implies, it's important that we take into account the size of charities and ensure that regulatory burdens on smaller charities are proportionate. So at the moment, there isn't a requirement for some charities, the smaller charities, to upload their annual accounts, but we do encourage people to share them. We will be looking at the question of whether some smaller charities, charitable incorporated organisations that at the moment can't voluntarily upload, might be able to do so in the future. That's, for me and for others, that's part of the position Helen was setting out about us understanding that we hold the right data and that we share that through the register and other means to show to the public the charity's contribution to society.
Thank you. And one for the lawyers. The Commission's staff often fail to understand matters, and that results in litigation. There is no alternative dispute resolution like HMRC have. Why not? John, that is for you.
I can saw that one coming, Ian. So I think firstly, we wouldn't recognise the statement that our staff often fail to understand things. If people are receiving a service from the Commission going through an application or in the course of casework, if they have a complaint about the service that we've provided, we've got a published complaints process which people can use. But we certainly wouldn't recognise that sort of general statement about our work. I think before addressing that particular point, it's worth clarifying that the vast majority of the litigation that the Commission is involved with is responding to appeals where we've made a decision and someone is challenging that decision in the first tier tribunal or possibly by judicial review. So we don't, in most cases, take litigation ourselves as a proactive step. We only receive appeals in respect of a small proportion of the decisions we make in any given year, and it's fair to say we have a very strong track record in successfully defending our appeals, which I think speaks to the robustness of our decision making and actually the effectiveness of our work in many respects.
Can I just add something to that, John? Because I think, you know, Parliament has set a very high bar for us to take regulatory action on it when we uncover wrongdoing or mismanagement in a charity. And that bar is rightly high. So, you know, we intervene when we have found things to be wrong. But I think it's really important that there is a regulator that is regulating on behalf of the public, that they know will take that robust action where there is a small proportion of people undertaking wrongdoing or harm. And I think that's really important, because what that does is it gives confidence in the rest of the charities, you know, the majority of charities that are doing great work, supporting beneficiaries, supporting society, supporting communities. The fact that we're there kind of calling out wrongdoing when it happens gives other people confidence that the majority of charities in this sector are kind of helping and achieving the aims that they set out to do.
Thank you. What does the Charity Commission, under its regulatory role, consider its main objective to be? And how does it achieve that objective? And I think I'm going to take that for myself, at least to begin with. So what we do basically is we register and re-regulate charities, and we do that in England and Wales, and that's what we do. Our aim is to ensure that charity can thrive and inspire people so that lives can be improved and society strengthened in England and Wales. That's what we're after. Effectively, we want to help uphold the compact between the public, charities, and government for the better of society. In short, anyone else want to add?
I think that's very clear.
Sure. No one wants to add. Right, moving on. Has there been a significant rise in individual charities folding during the pandemic? And what is the process if a charity finds that it can no longer function? Who wants to do that?
Yes, I'm happy to talk to that one. So Helen said quite a bit earlier on during her speech about the impact that the pandemic has had on the financial resilience of charities and how that impact has been quite mixed, but clearly quite severe in some cases. And obviously, even charities where they haven't been pushed to the point of insolvency, we've seen them having to flex their work to change their approach and perhaps row back on the services they've provided. I think, as with so many things in our sector, in these sort of situations, trustee decision-making really has to come back to first principles. You know, charities, just like in every other scenario, have to consider what's best in terms of furthering their purposes. So given that your resources are constrained, given that you're under significant financial pressure, what's the best step you can take? What are the best steps you can take as trustees in order to best manage the charity, best to provide the services that you're providing? And if insolvency is genuinely avoidable, then those steps are going to be about distributing assets where they can best be used and ensuring that any risks associated, and particularly risks of beneficiaries and staff and other individuals involved, are managed in the best way.
Thank you. What role does the Charity Commission have in regulating charities that work overseas? And how does the Commission ensure that charities working overseas comply with the law both here and abroad? You?
Shall I start?
Yeah, okay, you start. Yep.
Others come in on this one. So if a charity is registered with us, regardless of where it works in the world, it is subject to English and Welsh charity law. So regardless of in one sense of the laws of the land, we have to hold that charity to account for the legal framework that exists in this country, in these countries. So that's our role in regulating charities that operate internationally. That said, it can be, what we do recognise is that charities are working in very different operationally in very different legal environments. And what we try to do through our outreach team and our international team is to support some of those charities to ensure that they can both comply with the laws of the lands in which they're operating, but also continue to adhere to the charity law framework in this country. And we recognise the challenges that places for many trustees and for many organisations, but we think it's important that that those charities that are living up to the expectations of the public and the people that support them from England and Wales. So that's why they're regulated according to the framework in England and Wales. John, I don't know if you want to add or Paul?
Well, I think you've covered it very well, Helen.
It's relief.
Paul might want to add.
I was only going to add that we recently issued a regulatory alert to charities operating internationally in the aid sector following kind of our analysis of kind of issues that we were picking up through our intelligence and through serious incident reports, and that went out to kind of a large number of charities on our register who were listed as kind of operating in that area. And that was very much about kind of learning lessons from the Oxfam report that we published, learning lessons from how other charities were approaching it, and kind of best practice. And there are things like thinking about taking a survivor-centred approach, thinking as well about just how in that local situation, which may be very different from the UK, how you can make it more straightforward for people who may have been victims of kind of safeguarding incidents to come forward and to blow the whistle either internally or more widely.
So I just want to add something in. I'm also, obviously the most difficult situation probably at the moment is for those charities that are working in Afghanistan. And, when those events unravelled over the summer, we wrote out to all of the charities that we had on the register who said that they had operations in Afghanistan, just to, to reach out to them, to let them know that we were here. We held a webinar along with others in the sector with Foreign FCDO, recognising that those charities are facing particular challenges at the moment, and we want to continue to do what we can to support them actually at this time, because it is a very fast evolving situation, and it's important that as a regulator we do what we can just to support them in the challenges that they're facing.
Thank you. How does the panel view perceived attempts to politicise the Charity Commission? For example, through the now former Culture Secretary's comments in the Telegraph 2 weeks ago regarding recruitment of the new chair, and repeated attempts by some MPs to bring complaints about charities being too woke. I will have the first bash. Okay. We are an independent regulator. We're independent by statute, and we independently regulate carefully and thoughtfully. At the risk of bigging up Helen too much, she wrote a splendid blog following the National Trust report, which addresses these matters and sets out the matters that trustees should have in mind as they approach issues. The questions of how it affects beneficiaries, how it affects the charity, how it might affect people who might be giving you money. That is my opening. Others welcome to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tackled that actually in my speech, because I want to be clear to people that, we don't take account of the people who are complaining to us or writing to us with issues. And I think it's really important that the sector as a whole, doesn't start to become polemic in the way that it says this, you can listen to this person, but you can't listen to that criticism. So from that perspective, I think what I've said very clearly is we will listen to those complaints, and we will assess whether there are issues for us to follow up with. And if there are, we will follow up with those with trustees. And if there aren't, then we will say so. And I think for us as the regulator, we're not being politicised, actually. We are walking a very clear course through a very difficult, very difficult and challenging issues that I think we're facing as a society. And we will continue to do so.
Could I add to that, actually, just on that point? In some of the cases where we've considered these issues, in particular the high-profile ones, which I'm sure some people have in mind, I've heard some sort of criticism of the Commission that say, well, you know, the Commission should have known immediately that there was no issue here, or it would have been obvious to anyone who saw this that there was no issue. And that sort of criticism tends to suggest that there's something else behind our approach. And actually, I think the opposite is true, which is that we have to consider all complaints, as we've said, and it wouldn't be right for us as a regulator to either make snap judgments without considering the evidence or dismiss something without considering the evidence. So the fact that we spend longer before producing an outcome on a case than some people might want us to is not an indication that we have misconsidered something in any way.
Thank you. We have a question about a charity where the trustees are ill and would like to retire. They have assets and they have sought merger but have been unable to achieve that. What can or should they do next? I'm going to give that to the lawyer.
Fabulous. No, very, very happy to take that. And firstly, I'm sorry to hear that you're in that situation for the person or people who've asked that question, because it does sound very difficult. And unfortunately, yours won't be the only charity that's in this sort of situation. So I'm sorry to hear that. I think there are a number of options. It sounds like you're working through a number of options already, you know, in terms of finding other trustees, finding other resources in order to support the charity. I think, again, to come back very briefly to first principles, it is all about what is best to further the charity's purposes, what's in the best interests of the charity to further its purposes. And obviously, I'm not sure what the charity is or the specific circumstances. If the charity has assets, of course, they could simply be gifted to another charity, and many charities would be happy to take that sort of thing on. You know, a merger is a well-established concept, a well-established process, but it also can call to mind more kind of complex setups and processes than might be necessary. There might be other charities or even local authorities or other types of organisation who will willingly take the assets on. I think if trustees have exhausted all the options available to them, we've got guidance obviously published which can give charities some advice on their options. If charity trustees have exhausted all their options, then it might be that some of our enabling powers can be used if there's simply a legal barrier to a charity being able to merge or wind up, and we could deal with that through a written inquiry if that would be helpful.
I wonder if Helen Erner might want to say a little bit about the Revitalising Trusts programme that's run out of her team. So sorry to put you on the spot, Helen, but...
No, of course. So we, as Paul describes, we've got a programme called Revitalising Trusts that, like ourselves, operates in England and Wales. That's there to help us in the circumstances that John's described, that should there be assets remaining from a charity that can no longer function, or as the question infers, can't merge with another, that allows us to redeploy those assets to ensure that those funds that have been raised for the same types of beneficiaries go to other organisations, so beneficiaries can still be protected against the funds that's raised. So even if it's not possible for an individual charity to continue, there is a mechanism by which we can go through all the relevant checks and agreements with trustees and ensure any remaining assets goes to a very similar type of charity that we're confident can support the same type of beneficiaries. And we do revitalise tens of millions of pounds each year in order to protect beneficiaries that way. So please do contact us again through our contact centre if that sounds like you've got questions about that or need advice, and we'll be able to help you.
Thank you. A slightly specialist one. Are there any plans to cease the accepted charity system in the next 5 years? And if so, where will the additional resources needed come from?
So this is something that is not particularly completely within our control. So it's part of the legislative framework, which, as I understand it, the government has said it's not going to enact at this very moment. So that was, we think it's by 2030. Others will correct me if I'm wrong. But that the accepted framework for the moment is in place, recognising, you know, that's a big task both for the charities concern, but for the Commission as well, to bring everybody onto the register. So that has been pushed back until 2030 is the latest by which it needs to happen. So there are no current plans. I
think just to expand on that a little, the 2031 date is in relation to accepted church charities specifically, which may well be what the questioner refers to. That's, we think, the largest proportion of accepted charities which are due to come onto the register, yes, in or around 10 years' time. 2031 is the date when the legislation will change to that effect. There is, of course, the slightly separate category of exempt charities, and I don't know whether the questioner is referring to that as well, because accepted and exempt, although they sound very similar, are subtly different, and there's no plans to change the exempt framework at this point.
Thank you. Registering a charity. Why can't the Charity Commission admit a potential charity to become a provisional body, subject to a probationary period of 6, 12, 18, 24 months? This would cut the red tape. Once they have proved themselves fully fledged, they can be a registered charity.
The short answer to that is the law doesn't allow that to happen. So there's a longer legal answer to that. So I'm going to hand back to John to explain. But I understand the point that the questioner's making, and it's well made. But the law just doesn't allow us to do that. We are required, if something is a charity, is deemed a charity, we are required to put it on the register. And the concept behind the register is that once something is on the register, it's a significant move to go onto the register, and it's not something that you can easily remove a charity from the register unless that charity ceases to exist.
Yes, that's right, and I think the idea of provisional registration might be sort of attractive for a number of reasons. I think the difficulty we would have with it conceptually, depending on what specifically is proposed, is we have quite deliberately over a period of years established a very robust registration system which examines and tests applications for charitable status very heavily, and that's very much the direction of travel in terms of policy over 10 years or more. And that's due to the fact that we really need to make sure that we protect the register, we protect the boundaries of charitable status, and we make sure that we do have an accurate and up-to-date register. So I think the conceptual difficulty in a provisional form of registration is it suggests we might want to water down that kind of robust process, which I don't think is something we would necessarily be inclined to do.
Thank you. A question about the interaction between the CQC and the Charity Commission. Many charities and for-profit organisations provide care services which may require improvement or be inadequate. How do the two relate? Helen Erner?
I think it's Helen
Erner. Helen Erner.
Thank you. So the Care Quality Commission is one of a number of fellow regulators that we need to work with very carefully and in line with the remit and powers that set out for us through legislation. So where there are concerns in a charity that's providing health and social care, we have a statutory gateway by which the Care Quality Commission and ourselves can exchange information to ensure that we both take all steps necessary. For us, that's about ensuring that a charity is well run and that trustees are fulfilling their duties, which, if it isn't in place, can of course affect the quality of a service that CQC might itself be concerned about. So we are working ever closely with organisations such as CQC. It's not for us to inspect in the same way as CQC, but clearly we're here, as I say, through legal frameworks to share information and ensure that we support both the trustees and other regulators to protect beneficiaries from harm.
Thank you. Is the Charity Commission going to be more flexible in relation to the size of reserves required in view of the pandemic? I'm not sure whether that's a question about whether you should have more or whether you should be allowed to have less. But who wants to take it in any event? Paul wants to take it. Very good.
I'm happy to take this one. So we do have clear guidance on reserves, but we are very clear in that guidance that it is a matter to decide as trustees, taking into account the best interests of your charities and all the circumstances concerned. So it's certainly the case that we've seen charities drawing down, as Helen mentioned in her speech, drawing down on their reserves during the pandemic, and that is exactly what reserves are there for, so that you can kind of see your charity through good times and bad. So yes, we understand that some charities' reserves are depleted now, perhaps partly, perhaps entirely, after the kind of ravages of the pandemic, and we would ask trustees to think really carefully as they kind of build back from any difficulties that they've had. That one aspect of building back from this is to think about building back your reserves, so that when another rainy day comes along, actually you're well positioned to be able to kind of see your charity, but most importantly your beneficiaries through future hard times.
Can I just add that? Because I think one of the other things I'd want to say is just to people who are funding charities, because I hope that, we know that many charities have had to draw down on reserves over this past 18 months. And it's my hope that people who are providing grants and funding to charities, that you recognise that, and that you recognise that as a legitimate thing to fund through your grant process, because I think it is important that those who have depleted their reserves in order to keep going through the pandemic, that they are able to build back in order to be ready to face another rainy day even when it happens.
Thank you. Having been a trustee, I can confirm that core funding is brilliant funding. The CIO structure has now been going for 10 years. How happy are the Charity Commission with it as a structure, and is it effective?
Personally, I think it's a very good structure, because it's just it's one-stop shop, if you like, for charities. It stops the requirement that charities have to register with us and register with Companies House, and it provides the limited liability that is really important for organisations. So I think it is working effectively. I mean, where I have issues, it's around a number of CIOs are required to file their accounts with us, and where we have organisations not filing, we are seeing a higher proportion of CIOs not filing, and it's more difficult for us to do things about that. And that's something that I would like to see change, because I think it's really important that charities do file their accounts on time. So I think the structure itself is good. It's simple and it's charity focused. It allows it restricts liability, but also allows it reduces bureaucracy. But I would like to see that the change in behaviour, so that when somebody does register as CIO, that they adhere to the filing of accounts in the right way.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more, which is this. Can the Commission really hope to regulate 170,000 charities with a staff of 300? Who wants to do that?
450 we have now. So
I'm reading the question.
We are not an inspection organisation, so we don't monitor 170,000 charities. But what we do is deal with issues when they come to us. So that means we need to be better at identifying risk, at identifying and spotting issues before they happen, as I said earlier, and therefore being more proactive. I think the framework in which we operate isn't a heavy-handed legal framework. It recognises the important voluntary spirit of charitable endeavour. And I think it has given us the tools to be able to intervene where we do find wrongdoing. And certainly one of the surprises for me coming into this role was the amount of things that came into my inbox about people's unhappiness with certain things. Having been in and around the charity sector for most of my career, I was surprised by that. So it's clear that there's a role for us. We do need to intervene where things go awry. However, the framework is based on the concept of charitable endeavour being based on, on voluntary help, with that desire for people to help help each other to to give money and to give time. And I think it's important as a regulator we balance that intervention with the helping the sector thrive, and grow. So yes, I think we can always do more and we can always be better. But I think we are, I would say, an effective regulator of the charity sector.
Thank you. So thank you to all of you who sent in a question for our panel. I'd like to thank Helen and the rest of the executive leadership team for their commitment and hard work, especially throughout the pandemic, and for their thoughtful answers to your questions. I'd like to thank the production team here in the studio for supporting us in delivering this virtual event. And most of all, I would like to thank our charities, their staff and trustees for everything that you do, and for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much and goodbye.